Hi there, my name is Amanda Newell, and this is Mammalogy exam number 2. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the speaker who spoke on disease in white-tailed deer. He spoke about hemorrhagic disease and chronic wasting disease. With hemorrhagic disease, the host is mainly the white-tailed deer as well as some wild and domestic ruminants. White-tailed deer, you'll mainly see the symptomatic versions of the disease. The other animals are normally more asymptomatic. There are 2 different viruses that will cause this disease, and they are transmitted by a small insect called midge. Animals are infected when they are bitten by these insects. It's not transmittable from deer to deer. There does have to be that insect vector in the middle. There is no treatment for the disease. The disease is something that causes the small blood vessels and capillaries to hemorrhage within the body. Sometimes the body is able to clear the virus, but it's almost as if the damage has already been done. So death does occur pretty soon after infection. There's not a lot of management going on with this disease. As far as impacts on the population, something where mortality is a little bit difficult to quantify, and then it also varies by outbreak. It has been found that populations do often bounce back from this disease within a couple of years. The next disease is called chronic wasting disease. This is found in elk, deer, and moose. There are other variations of the disease that are common, such as mad cow disease. The vector for this is something called a prion. It's a little different. It affects the proteins of the body. It's transmitted often through oral exposure. An infected animal will shed these prions through saliva, through feces, things like that. Those get on the food sources of other animals, and then it is transmitted. There is no treatment for this disease. When it comes to managing it, the main management plan is basically slowing the movement of deer, so parts ban, urine-based lure bans, captive movement restrictions. It has not been shown decisively whether or not this disease can be passed on to humans. This disease will affect deer populations over time. You will see a decrease. It also affects hunters in the area quite a bit. Since we don't know whether or not this disease can affect people, hunters are often cautioned when there is an outbreak in their area. Next, I'm going to talk about echolocation. According to Webster, echolocation is a physiological process for locating distant or invisible objects such as prey by sound waves reflected back to the emitter from those objects. There are 2 orders that utilize echolocation in mammals. Those include the toothed whales, such as dolphins, and then also bats. So I think it's pretty commonly known that these animals do use echolocation. So with echolocation in dolphins, it's kind of an interesting process. So the dolphin will emit a click or a sound from the top of their head, which is directed by a fat deposit called the melon. This is what's highlighted up in yellow in the image above. The melon can actually help direct the transmission of the click. Depending on the size of the toothed whale, this melon also kind of varies in size. It's the most pronounced you'll see on the beluga whale I'm going to talk about here in a minute. They have a very pronounced melon on the top of their head, which is really kind of interesting. So the click or sound wave will go off within the water. It will hit something, hopefully a prey source, and then bounce back those vibrations to the dolphin. The dolphin is then able to detect it with another fat deposit, which is within the jaw. The jaw can conduct the sound to the inner ear, which is processed by the brain. The study, this listed below, talks more in depth about how echolocation is used by dolphins. It, for a long time, was believed that there was just a solid pattern when it came to the clicks. This study was actually able to train dolphins into using clicks at certain distances. So it showed a little more about how precise the echolocation is by the dolphins when it comes to finding prey sources or locating things at greater distances. So the next group of animals I'm going to talk about are the beluga whales. Beluga whales are some of my favorite animals. I did work for a while at the Georgia Aquarium. They usually have 4 beluga whales in residence there, so I did spend a lot of time watching their behavior. They're super intelligent animals, super expressive, very playful. I was talking a little bit about the melon on the previous slide. So belugas have this very enlarged melon on top of their head, which is those fat deposits. But they are the only animal, toothed whale actually, that can control the muscles underneath the melon quite well. So it allows that movement to be seen really on their skin. You can see the melon moving around as they want it to be moved, which is kind of weird when you initially watch them, but I think it's really cool. So the beluga whale, they live to be about 30 years old. There have been some studies that say they can live to be much older, just through predation and things like that. Beluga whales, most of the time, do not live to be that long, so average is about 30 years. They range between 9 to 18 feet, 9 to 13 being more the size of the females, males being on the larger end of things. They weigh between 1,500 and 3,500 pounds. They're very distinct in coloration. They are pure white. The young whales are a gray color until they reach maturity. They're found in Arctic and subarctic waters, so all of the northern colder waters. They're highly sociable animals. They're found in small pods in the 10 to 15 unit range, and they're unstable pods. So some animals will have a set pod their entire lives. Belugas, while they do want to be around other belugas, they're more interchangeable. They might join several pods and switch throughout their lifetime. They hunt in very coordinated groups, and then they're very playful. They often blow bubble rings in the water just to kind of entertain themselves. So I was talking about unique behavior, that movement of their melon, and then echolocation. They use like all toothed whales. Reproduction, they reach sexual maturity between the ages of 9 and 15. They have one calf about every 3 years. They have a rather long gestation period, about 12 to 14 months. Calves are dependent on their mothers for, we think, around a year. They are near threatened. They have a population over 150,000. This has been declining. So there is a push to conserve these animals. A little further reading on the beluga whales. The first paper here talks about using satellite tags to track beluga whales to see in the Bering Sea their migration patterns, whether they leave during the colder months will return to the same areas. The second talks about the weaning age of belugas. This actually uses the teeth of beluga whales to determine how long they were dependent on their mother, as well as a lot of other physiological aspects of their life based on those tooth records. It's actually a very interesting study. Next, I'm going to talk about invasive mammals. I'm going to talk about the wild boar. This animal is extremely invasive. It's characterized by short, thin legs. It's a very stocky animal. Males have those dangerous tusks. They really range in size depending on where you find them. Most of the time, you're seeing between 130 to 220 pounds. Some areas they do get a little larger, but some areas you find them actually much smaller. They have a very developed sense of smell. A lot of pigs do. Um, they have a gestation period of about 4 months. They have litters of 4 to 6 piglets. They're omnivorous. So their native range, this is a really cool map because it kind of shows their native distribution in the purple. They're more in the Eurasia, North Africa area, but since they've become invasive, they are pretty much located worldwide except for Antarctica and the really cold upper Arctic regions. It's a large problem in the American South as well. These are sort of a dangerous animal. You don't want to run across one in the wild. So it is dangerous to human populations. They also do a lot of damage. They root, they wallow, they trample. This interrupts nutrient cycling. It'll pollute waters. It can even disrupt the path of some waters. Um, they compete with native wildlife. They also destroy a lot of farmland. If you ask a lot of farmers, they are not happy with the wild boars just from the amount of destruction that they do cause. So here's a little bit of further reading on the wild boar. This first one is just an estimation of the boar population, a kind of a current look. The study came out a couple years ago, kind of seeing where the wild boar population stands. Another concern with the wild boar is their spread of disease. There are a couple of diseases that are very specific to the wild boar that scientists are currently worried about, since there might be some antimicrobial resistance. I found actually several studies about the threat of microbe transmission from these animals. So that's something else that needs to be considered when looking at the invasive species. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the 5 different subspecies of caribou and reindeer talked about in the paper that was presented for this final. The first subspecies is the barren ground caribou. Like most caribou, they do migrate long distances. They primarily feed on lichen. They are found in Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. You find them in Greenland. They are in a threatened status. They're most identifiable by their distinct white characteristics you can see along the neck in the picture of these two here. Next is the Peary caribou. They are found in the high Arctic islands of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories of Canada. So there is some overlap between the populations of the Peary caribou and the barren ground caribou. As you can see here, a lot of their populations even migrate together. This is the smallest of the North American caribou. They migrate about 100 miles in one direction and then back. So not a huge migration. Some caribou migrate extremely long distances. Their conservation status is threatened. Next is the Svalbard reindeer. Sorry about the misspelling of reindeer there. So these are found exclusively on an archipelago of Norway. They're relatively sedentary. They don't really migrate. They are a threatened species um, of reindeer. In about the 1920s, they were very overhunted and they almost went extinct. So they have come back to a more stable number, but they still are not very abundant on this island. And then the next is the reindeer that is found in Scandinavia and northern Eurasia. These have a large migration. They are considered vulnerable. Their numbers are a little higher than some of the other subspecies, subpopulations. And then finally are the caribou, which are found in northern Quebec and Labrador of Canada. So these southern parts of Canada, the two we talked about at the start were found in northern Canada. Um, they have the lengthy migrations that you hear about, some of the biggest migrations ever seen in North America. They are a vulnerable conservation status as well, a little more abundant. But these are some really cool animals, and this was an interesting study to read about. So that's about everything for this midterm. Thank you very much.